Tonight we're going to be looking at two chapters because, again, they're small or not very many verses. Chapter 19, chapter 20. Chapter 19 starts out 1 and 2. It's laws of the purification is what the chapter is about. And the Lord spoke unto Moses and said unto Aaron, saying, This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord hath commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein there is no blemish, and upon which never came a yoke. Okay? Now, we went through the offerings back in Numbers. All the different offerings they have, and the animals that they use for the offerings. This is separate. This is to put together a purification process. And this is before they get started even doing all this. Well, this is where they're at today. They have red heifers over there. I think they have 4 of them. They started out with 5, and one of them has gotten too many white hairs, so it can't be used. And the other 4, they're still watching them, but they can be used. And then there's an age. They can only be a certain age, from like 2 years or 2 years to 4 years or something, that they can only be used.
That'd be young?
Yeah, it's fairly young. Yeah. So, heifer, so female. So.
Yeah, no, never been pregnant.
Never been pregnant, never had pulled, never gave milk. So it says here, never, all that stuff, and it had to be red. Why red, do you think? What does red represent? The blood. And it's similar to the blood of Christ. It's symbolic to the blood of Christ. Just think of this. God was putting this into place thousands of years even before Christ came. So without blemish. It doesn't say here, I don't think, but in another one of the books I was reading, can't have over more than 2 white hairs. Cow's got a lot of hairs. So I'd hate to check it out go check that heifer again for another. Oh, good grief. That'd be tough.
How many times?
So, yeah, they have to do it. So evidently, because they're still growing, they might, sprout one out there, I guess. 3 through 10, Brother Epperson.
And ye shall give her unto Eleazar the priest, that he may bring her forth without the camp. And one shall slay her before his face. And Eleazar the priest shall take the blood with his fingers and sprinkle of the blood directly before the tabernacle of the congregation 7 times. And one shall burn the heifer in his sight, her skin and her flesh and her blood, and her dung shall be burned. And the priest shall take cedar wood and hyssop and scarlet, and cast it into the midst of the burning of the heifer. Then the priest shall wash his clothes, he shall bathe his flesh in the water, and afterwards he shall come into the camp, and the priest shall be unclean until the evening. And he that burneth her shall wash his clothes in the water, and bathe his flesh in the water, and shall be unclean until evening. And a man that is clean shall gather up the ashes of the heifer, and lay them without the camp in a clean place. And he shall be kept for the congregation, and it shall be kept for the congregation of the children of Israel, for a water separation. It is a purification for sin. And he that gathereth the ashes of the heifer shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until evening, and shall be unto the children of Israel, and unto a stranger that sojourner among them, for a statute forever.
Okay. So, unlike the other sacrifices, where they take the animal and they drain all of the blood out, they don't drain all the blood out of this one. They take a little bit of blood, he dips his finger in it and sprinkles it 7 times. He's at the altar, okay, right there. That altar is right in front of the tabernacle, and that's what's said, before the tabernacle. Another place it said sprinkled on the altar. So it's right there real close. He's sprinkling that on. They put the whole heifer on the fire and burn it up.
Wow.
Okay? So with that, everything that's with it, I mean all parts of it, because they have to kill the animal. When you kill the animal,
They burn a hole?
Yeah, whole.
It or nothing?
they didn't do anything with this one. They didn't bleed it out. They didn't do anything. They just burned it up whole.
I wonder if that's what you were saying.
Christ
Yeah.
gave him the whole self.
That's right. Christ gave his whole self.
Oh, that's
Okay.
why, okay.
He gave his whole self for it. Normally, they get the hide of it. Okay, they don't here. They burn the hide. They burn the flesh. They burn the blood. They burn the offal, the fat. They
And it
burn
wasn't for any
everything.
other reason but that.
Yeah, and this was just to get started, to get the purification down, because then the rest of the priests could be purified and start doing their duties. They couldn't do their duties until they were purified. So every time, and if you remember, every time they came to do their tabernacle duties, they had to wear special robes, had to wash themselves, they had one robe on, had to take that robe off, wash themselves, put on the clean robe, go do their duty, then come back, take the robes off, put their old robes back on, and then go. Each one of these people that had touched this heifer became unclean, so they had to go back. And this is why they gave it to Eleazar. Aaron, they didn't give it to Aaron because Aaron had to remain clean to perform all the rest of the duties. Okay? So God set this up in a beautiful manner. I mean, the way this had to be done. They also took some cedar wood and some hyssop and some scarlet, which is scarlet material, is what they were talking about. Again, scarlet because of the blood. Cedar wood, it repels insects. It's a very, you build stuff out of cedar wood and it'll last for a long time because it repels all the insects. If you keep it inside,
It will, and cedar wood repels bugs too, doesn't it?
That's right.
Because some people put them in their closets.
Yeah, I've got pieces of when I was building my fence, I didn't need a 6-foot fence, I need a 4-foot fence, but the 6-foot pickets were just as cheap as 4-foot. So I bought the 6-foot ones, cut them off, and I laid them in my closet, different places, the bottom of those boards, because they're cedar. I mean, yeah. So they also put that in there with it, the cedar wood, some hyssop, which is a plant, okay. Down here it says cedar is extremely resistant to disease, to rot, and is well known for its quality and preciousness.
Wow.
These properties may be the reason for including it here. It's also symbolic to the wood of the cross. And some people even think the cross that Jesus was crucified on may have been cedar. Don't know that for sure, but that's what some people think. The hyssop is not only used for cleansing the lepers. Okay, we go back to that when they were cleansing the lepers, it's used in there. It was also used when Jesus, later on, was dying. They gave him to drink from the hyssop. They dig that hyssop on a sponge up there and give it to him. Yeah. It's also, David said in Psalms, purge me with hyssop. So, and you tie that together with the rules that they gave for the leper. David's saying, I'm just as bad as a leper. I need cleansed with hyssop. Purge me with hyssop. Again, that's just amazing to me that, he's relating himself that far down, that I'm just as bad as a leper that has to be put out from God. Of course, scarlet is the color of blood. Pictures the cleansing blood of Jesus on the cross. Scarlet was used in the veil and the curtains of the tabernacle, in the garments of the high priest, the covering for the table of showbread. It was also the sign of Rahab's salvation, the scarlet thread that she hung down from the wall. The color of the mocking of the king's robe that was put on Jesus was the scarlet robe. So it's just, here again, types and shadows all across these materials. 2,000 years, maybe or so before, right, Stephen? And it said these ashes, once the one guy killed the calf, one guy burnt the calf, another guy got the ashes out of it. Once they gathered the ashes, they didn't even keep the ashes in the camp. They took it without the camp. It says the residue from the burning of the carcass, the cedar, the hyssop, and the scarlet fabric together would produce a lot of ash. You got a 500-pound, 400-pound heifer, you're going to have a lot of ash. Said this could last for years, for years for that. Because they just take a little bit of the ashes to put it in the water to purify it. So, okay. Ruby, going to read down there in the middle of page 3, 11 to 13.
11 to 13.
Yeah.
Touching dead bodies made one ceremony unclean.
Right.
He that touches the dead body of any man shall be unclean 7 days, and he shall purify himself with it on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day he shall be clean. But if the purity not himself the 3rd day, then the 7th day he shall not be clean. Whosoever touches the dead body of any man that is dead, and purifies not himself, defile the tabernacle of the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from Israel, because the water of separation was not sprinkled upon him, and he shall be unclean, and his uncleanness is yet upon him.
Okay, so it goes into then what needs to be purified. The one thing that needs to be purified is somebody, it's not one, but one of the things that needs to be purified is somebody that's touched a dead body. We talked about this before, that, they have to be
They can't touch
unclean.
anything.
Yeah, they can't participate in the festival, they can't do a lot of stuff. Well, here it's telling them, you got to purify yourself. It takes 7 days to purify yourself. You have to be separated that long from everybody.
So they do they purify themselves every day for 7 days?
No, it says they did it they purified him on the 3rd day, and then on the 7th day. So he had to go to the priests to get purified. They just couldn't go out there and grab some ash and throw on themselves in some water. If you go back, and it'll say here in a little bit, the water that they get had to be running water. So they'd scoop up some water, maybe a cup of the water, sprinkle some of the ash in it, and then they'd sprinkle that on the person to purify them. And then they'd go back again. So it's not just the priest that's getting purified. It's more than that, okay? This is another indication. It says if he doesn't finish and do that 3rd day and 7th day purification, then he'll be cut off. He can't participate. He can't be one of the Jews. I mean, basically that's what he's saying. He's unclean. So he can't approach the tabernacle. He can't do this. He can't do that. In John 13, 5 through 11, there's a parallel. It says, and it's a different version, but it says, if we are bathed by Jesus, we need only to have our feet washed, as they become unclean in the normal practice of life. Remember, he was washing the disciples' feet. Peter said, no, you ain't going to wash mine. And he said, well, then you're not going to have any part of it. He said, wash my head, my heart, everything. No, just your feet. So here again, this relates to that purification. It goes back to that. Yeah. These laws were relevant to all in Israel, but especially to the priests who had the potential to defile the tabernacle of the Lord. Under the new covenant, the Christian also has a special call to purity, because we can also defile the dwelling place of God, which is our body. We have to be pure. Okay? That's what Paul was telling us in Corinthians. Okay, the next one, 14 through 16, Bertha. It's on page 4.
saw when a man died in a tent, all that come into the tent and all that is in the tent shall be unclean 7 days. And even open vessel which hath no covering bound upon it is unclean. And whosoever toucheth one that is slain with a sword in the open fields, or a dead body, or a bone of a man, or a grave shall be unclean 7 days.
Okay.
Wow.
Now we go back and we look at some of the other things of a dead animal, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, I think. A dead animal, you're unclean, but it's just for a day, I believe. But we'll catch it in a minute. But here, if a man dies in his tent, so when whoever goes in to get him and pull him out, they're unclean. Everything that's in the tent is unclean. If there's any vessels in their tent, pots, and they don't have a lid on them, what's in the vessels are unclean. Those vessels have to be broke and, thrown away. Now, if they have a lid on them, they're okay. Again, what does that symbolize to me? That's a sterile environment. If you died from a disease, that disease may have gotten on your stuff, on the tent. Just like leprosy. Leprosy could get in the tent. They talked about you got to check the wall of your house, If you dig out that wall, if it's black, it's, one thing. So anything in there, this is God preventing his people, giving them a way to be pure, but also medically to keep them alive.
Well, many people before they start washing and using different, like a doctor would cut on one guy and turn around and take a knife and cut on somebody else.
Yeah.
And they learn.
They contaminate them.
You gotta, get rid of that stuff.
Make
At
you not
least
want to
wash
go
it,
and
clean
do
it
anything.
up.
That's right. Well, it's just setting them aside. And that's another reason why they tried to bury the people as quickly as they can. Somebody had to prepare the body. They had to get the body out, wash the body down, wrap it, put the perfume on it. So whoever that was, that person was going to be unclean for 7 days. Let's see what it says. It says, what's inherently clean about a dead body? It's simply that death is what? The result of sin. Okay? From the very beginning, God told Adam, don't touch the tree of the fruit of the good, knowledge of good and evil. In that day you do. What will you do? You'll die. They didn't die physically right then, but they died spiritually, and then later on they died. So that is a cause. Our death is a cause of sin. So that's why this uncleanliness, it's calling upon it. That sin, death is like sin made visible.
Yeah.
People die because we're in a sinful world. Everybody wants to know, oh, he died so young. Well, yeah, but everybody's going to die. It's sad, except the people that go in the rapture. So far, there's only been 2 people that we know of, and hopefully here in a few years, days, months, who knows, a lot of us will be raptured. But anyway, Paul was making kind of a play on words in Romans 7 and 24 when he falls out in frustration. Who will deliver me from this body of death? He said, we can only be delivered from the body of death if we receive and walk in the precious work of Jesus on our behalf, not anything that we've done. And that's what Paul was going through there during that, talking about the Romans there. In Romans, I'm sorry. 17 through 19, the purpose for the ashes. And for an unclean person, they shall take the ashes of the burnt heifer of purification for sin, and running water shall be put thereto in a vessel. And a clean person shall take hyssop, and dip it in the water, and sprinkle it upon the tent, and upon all the vessels, and upon the person that were there, and upon him that touched a bone, or one slain, or one dead, or a grave. And the clean person shall sprinkle upon the unclean on the third day, and on the seventh day, and on the seventh day, I think I repeated that, he shall purify himself and wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he shall be clean at even. So even the guy that's doing the cleansing, he has to go cleanse himself after the seventh day. After all that. So that tells us a little bit about the purification, what happens. And it says at the evening you shall be clean. The ashes of the red heifer, which is the ingredients of all who speak the work of God or Jesus on our behalf, combined with the water, which speaks of the work of the Word of God and the Holy Spirit, they combine together to bring cleansing. It can cleanse even though the uncleanliness brought about death. All this cleansing is a precious picture, but the reality is in Jesus. For if the blood of bull and goats and the ashes of a heifer, sprinkling the unclean, sanctifies for the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living God. So to the Jew, it's very evident. We had to do this as Jewish people. Jesus did this for us. His blood cleansed us. Instead of the hyssop and the heifer, of the blood of the heifer, now it's the blood of Jesus. And that's what the author of Hebrews is telling us there. Okay, Numbers 20 through 22, Brother Epstein.
But the man that shall be unclean and shall not purify himself, that so shall be cut off from among the congregation, because he hath defiled the sanctuary of the Lord. The water of separation hath not been sprinkled upon him, he is unclean. And it shall be a perpetual statute unto them, that they sprinkle the water of separation, shall wash his clothes, and he that toucheth the water of separation shall be unclean until evening. And whosoever the unclean person touches shall be unclean, and the soul that toucheth it shall be unclean until evening.
So even the ones in the process of it, they have to be unclean for a certain period of time. So there are certain things that they can't do. But it's until evening. To them, what is evening? It's the next day. Okay? When it becomes sundown, which is evening to them, Friday evening is their Shabbat. It starts their day of rest in the evening, and it ends at Saturday at evening. So, for that time, so if they had to do this process and they did it at noon, they didn't have to wait that long, just 6 hours. But then they could be, clean. But there may be something come up that they can't do during that time. So the rules here is your kid. Many rules. What to do, what you can't do. Boy, I'm glad I don't have to worry about it. The blood of Christ covers us. And then we'll move right on into 20, okay?
I'm glad we don't have to do all that these days.
That's right.
That'd be a hard to remember all that.
So 20 and 1, we start a new chapter, and it's a new subject. The death, the beginning of the end. Okay, from chapter 19, a little bit before that, we don't exactly know when. We jump about 38 years.
Wow.
Yeah, to the end of their travelings.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. Chapter 20, verse 1. Then came the children of Israel, even the whole congregation, into the desert of Zin in the first month. And the people abode in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. Who's Miriam? Who was her? Who was she? Moses' sister. Moses' and Aaron's sister. This goes back, to talk about what happened 3 or 4 chapters ago when they didn't go into the promised land. What did they say? Nobody over the age of 40. We're going to wander in the wilderness until everybody dies. So Miriam died. She was chosen, one of the chosen by God. God actually spoke to Miriam. I believe, if I go back in here. Aaron spoke to Aaron too. He dies here just a little bit. It says Miriam's death was an important point in the journey from Egypt to Canaan. She was the first of Moses' siblings to die in the wilderness, and her death was an important demonstration of the fulfillment of what God had promised, that the generation which refused to enter Canaan would die in the wilderness, and the new generation would enter instead. So let's just start bringing that home, that nobody's going to go over there from this generation. That's for who does that include? Includes Aaron, includes Moses too. Even though it's not said, and we'll see here in a minute, God doesn't allow him to, but it covers him. So God's promise, I don't know if Aaron or Moses or Aaron or Miriam thought that they may be excluded from that. Okay, all you sinners out there. Yeah, he doesn't. He's told them that's what it is. It says she was great for her courage in assisting Moses and his parents at the very beginning, saving him, okay, from getting destroyed by putting him in the basket and sending him to the Pharaoh's daughter. But that didn't exclude her from the problems that she had. She was one of those that was against Moses. Okay, her and Aaron came up against Moses. Remember, she got leprosy?
Yeah.
And she had to go back. Okay, 2 through 6, Brother Epperson.
Now there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Why have you brought us up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness, that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? It's not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. So Moses and Aaron went out from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of the meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them.
So again, they're upset. They don't have any water. They travel around for these almost 8 years. Now this is not a chronological. I've said that before. The book is set out chronologically, but it jumps quite a bit. Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, they fill in the gaps. Okay? This particular one is the second time that they needed water. The first time God told him to speak or to hit the rock. Okay? This particular time, we'll see in just a minute, God tells him to speak to the rock. So this is where Moses' failure is. The people come back up, they still have the same, and you know, I can guess that it's maybe not so that many of the young people, but it's the older people that's bringing this up. We've traveled now 38 years, and it's not all of them, because over that 38 years, people are dying. Every year, every month, all this stuff, they're dying. So whether they've almost all gone or not, I don't know. But this particular, after Miriam died, and before Aaron died, he dies here at the end of this chapter, we see it's being passed down from their children. Because a lot of it, they had to have died. It's been 38 years. God made this promise. Nobody over the age of 40 is going to enter into the promised land. It's starting to happen. And their kids are even catching on. Oh, you've led us out to this place to die. We have no water. We can't water our animals. We can't water this. We can't do that. So again, Moses and Aaron, they went out from the assembly and they fell upon their face. Every time they would get upset, and it's kind of like, I'm getting down on the ground because if lightning's going to strike again, I'm going to get out of the way. I mean, that's the way I kind of view it. And that's what the glory of the Lord appeared unto them again. Now, it's still following them. It's still leading them and guiding them. But evidently, the Shekinah, some difference appeared, and it came unto them where they could see. So they got scared, and Moses and Aaron was going to make intercession for them. In top of page 3, 7 through 8, Ruby.
Your turn.
Yeah.
Numbers 27 to 8.
Uh-huh.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock, and give drink to the congregation and their animals.
Okay. So he's telling him to take the rod. It's kind of a test. Take your rod, but don't hit it. Speak to the rock. He didn't tell him don't hit it, but he said speak to the rock. And it shall give out water. But that's not really what he did. It says specifically God told Moses to take the rod, but don't use it. Water would be provided if Moses would just speak to the rock before their eyes. Back at Mount Sinai, back in Exodus 17 and 6, God told Moses to strike the rock, and when the water came forth. But now he was merely to speak to the rock, yet with the rod in his right hand. The rod was a symbol of God's authority. Okay? That rod, like we talked about last week, it budded. It was a rod that parted the sea. It was a rod that turned into a snake. It was a rod that when he touched it to the river, the blood started coming out. All these things. So it's an indication to the people that this is God's symbol for them. Okay, Bertha, 9 through 11.
And so Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered and assembled together before the rock. And he said to them, hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly. And the congregation and their animals drank.
Okay. Now back, it's just amazing. Back in Exodus, that's several years ago, in their time frame, they had, when they came out of Israel, maybe up to 2.5 million people. It's been 38 years. How many did they have now? Maybe 10 million? I don't know. Duplicate, maybe not, maybe 5 million. That's still a lot of people. And a lot of animals and everything. How much water? It's not a trickle coming out of the rock. It's got to be gushing, to fill up pools and stuff where they could gather this.
But don't you know, Moses is each time, he, like you said, he fell on his face before God,
Right.
and pleaded their cause. This time, it's like he was fed up.
He got mad. And I think that's part of what it says here in the next verse. And he kind of lets them have it. Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? and he's almost taunting them. So God didn't tell him to talk to the people, did he?
No.
He said, go speak to the rock. But Moses turned around and he started talking to people. You stupid bunch of, And he didn't, he shouldn't have. He was lecturing the people. God didn't tell him to do that. He had an attitude on his heart too. He was bitter. Said before, Moses fell on his face before God when the people rebelled. We've read about that several times. At Mara, when the people had the bitter water, but they needed to be boldly confronted, and Moses did it at Massah and Meribah, but without the edge of anger, contempt, and bitterness that we see here. There are hundreds of explanations for Moses' frustration. Psalms 106, 32, and 33 describes how the people provoke Moses here, but not a single excuse. You can have an excuse, but it's no excuse. So he was frustrated. He was fed up. For 40 years, he's led these people around, and they've just kind of ticked him off for the last time. You're getting on my last nerve. We've heard that say before.
Kind of like, I'm still a human. And I'm tired of y'all.
Said, then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock. He not only struck it, but he struck it twice.
Yep.
God told him the first time just to strike the rock, but now he did it twice. But God still provided. The water came out abundantly, it says. God still provided for the people. This teaches us that God's love for people is so great that he will use imperfect instruments, which is us, and the fact that God uses someone is no evidence to themselves or to the people that they are really right with God or ministering according to God's heart. Well, my battery just died. Everything's dying tonight. So, let's see. Mevo died already, so we're not on the Facebook. Anyway, let's see. Who read? Was that Bertha? Did you read that, or Ruby read that?
It's your turn.
My turn. I thought it was. 12 through 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron. Now, for some reason, y'all got the other version. I got the King James version, so I don't know why. I printed off the same. Because you believe me not, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore ye shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. This is the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel strove with the Lord, and he was sanctified in them. Basically saying, because you didn't believe me, that God could provide, he did. It says unbelief has many forms. It was easy to see Israel's unbelief in Numbers 14, when they refused to trust God to enter the promised land. Here Moses was also unbelieving. Okay? But different circumstances. Moses didn't trust God to correct his people and took it upon himself to do so when God did not want to correct Israel. He wanted Moses to follow his instructions. And he didn't. What Moses did was an unholy thing. He made God look no different than an angry man or one of the temperamental pagan gods. He did not reflect the heart and character of God before the people. Moses was God's man. He was supposed to be, all that. When he went up on the mountain, his face shone. The people were so in awe. It's just amazing. But it just goes to prove Moses was human too. As great, and even later on in the annals of Hebrews, where it talks about the great men of faith, Moses is still listed. But it's kind of asterisk, He didn't get to fulfill everything that God wanted him to do. If he would have been able to go into the promised land.
Well, isn't it sad that Moses didn't obey the Lord
I know.
the promised land?
Well, he's been traveling around, like I said, for 40 years. We get tired after 20 minutes of a ministry. 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, we're getting ready to go to the promised land again. Brother Everson, 14 through 17.
Now Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus saith your brother Israel, you know all the hardships that have befallen us, how our fathers went down to Egypt, and we dealt in Egypt a long time, and the Egyptians afflicted us and our fathers. When we cried out to the Lord, he heard our voice and sent an angel and brought us up out of Egypt. Now we are in Kadesh, a city on the edge of your border. Please let us pass through your country. We will not pass through fields or vineyards, nor will we drink water from your wells. We will go along the king's highway. We will not turn aside to the right or to the left until we have passed through your territory.
Okay. You remember who Edom was? He's not referred to that too much in the Bible. I mean, he's already dead a long time ago. Remember Esau? Jacob and Esau? This is Esau. The people of Edom was the people of Esau, his lineage. So that's why he called your brother Israel, because God renamed Jacob to Israel. Okay? And he said, your brother Israel, we're from your brother Israel. Let us go by. And he just thought that they would let him pass. But Edom, we'll see, they didn't. And here again, up until that time, what you got, 5 million people walk through their land? That's going to really trample stuff. But he said, he reinforced it. We're not going to eat, of any of your fields. We're not going to drink from your wells. We're not going to do any of that. We're just going to go down the highway. It's a shortcut. We want to go this way. Okay, 18, top of page 8, Ruby, 18 through 21.
Page 8.
It starts on the bottom.
Oh, yours does? Okay, sorry.
On the top.
No, it starts at the bottom of 6.
Yep.
We will go by the highway, and if I or my livestock drink any of your water, then I will pay for it. Let me pass through or foot, nothing more. Then he said, you shall not pass through. So Edom came out against them with many men and with a strong hand. Thus Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory. So Israel had turned away from him.
So he was afraid. Okay, and it wasn't the man Esau. Esau had been dead as long as his brother had been dead, Isaac, which is 400 plus years. Okay? But it's still the people of Israel, people of Edom, and they said, no, we're not going to let you go by. It's a little scary, We got so many million Mexicans wants to go to Canada. I don't know if they want to go through, up I-40. How come that, it's going to take them a while to go through and all this. That's kind of the way, it wasn't that far. It wasn't very far at all. Compared to that, that's a long trip. But he said no, and they brought out a bunch of their army to show force and show them that, hey, you don't need to go out on the army.
Right.
So their army was keeping them away. So they turned Israel away from them. Okay, the next 22 through 29, Bertha.
Now the children of Israel, the whole congregation, journeyed from Kadesh and came to Mount Hor. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Mount Hor by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall gather to his people, for he shall not enter the land which I have given to the children of Israel, because you rebelled against my word at the water of Meribah, take Aaron and Esau, your son, and bring them up to Mount Hor, and strip Aaron of his garments, and put them on Esau's son. For Aaron shall be gathered to his people and die there. So Moses did just as the Lord commanded. And they went up to Mount Hor, and in the sight of all the congregation, Moses stripped Aaron of his garments and put them on Esau his son. And Aaron died there on the top of the mountain. Then Moses and Esau came down from the mountain. Now when all the congregation saw that Aaron was dead, all the house of Israel mourned for Aaron 30 days.
Okay. So here is where Aaron meets his death. They're getting ready now to go in. They went ahead. It's a long, hard journey. Okay, they couldn't go the easy way. They had to go the hard way because of Edom. So they went the hard way through the hard, no highways, 1 lane traffic, 2 lane traffic kind of deal. But since Aaron couldn't cross over, and it was time for him to go, because the people were going to move over, he told him, you need to transfer the priesthood over to his son now. And they did that all in front of the people. Now it said his garments, it's talking about his priestly garments. So he got his robe, his crown, his breastplate, the girdle, all these things that represented the high priest, took them off of Aaron, they put them onto Eleazar, and everybody saw that. And then they went up to the mountain. God blessed that. Aaron died. He didn't come back. Okay? And when the people saw that he didn't come back, they knew Aaron had died, and now Eleazar is in charge. He's the high priest. He's not in charge.
And you would have thought, my thinking anyway, that Moses would have died before Aaron.
Yeah, but he did. Moses was the last one to die.
Yeah.
Of those. Apparently, that's what we see.
He stayed, God kept him right to the very last.
Right.
Before he went over.
If you go back to Numbers, we haven't got there yet, but Numbers 33 and 38 says, Aaron died in the 40th year after the children of Israel had come out of the land of Egypt. So we know this chapter covered a bunch of years. It says there's very little record of what happened during these years. They are compressed into only about 5 1/2 chapters, while the single year at Mount Sinai is given almost 50 chapters. You know, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, all those. This was to demonstrate that the years accomplished nothing except the death of the generation of the unbelievers. That's all it was there for. These were just the years of surviving in the desert, wasted years waiting for the old man to die. That's the first thing that I've heard. I mean, the first time I've heard that, reference that, because when you have sanctification, that old man has to die. That's just exactly what happened with the people of Moses, the Israelites. Those 40 years and older had to die before they could go and take the promised land. It says, because Israel had rebelled, their life has run to waste ever since, and only now, after a lapse of time and after so much suffering, did Israel find itself in a position to recommence the march that was suspended at Kadesh. So it is with the churches which have reached a certain point, then rebelled against the voice of God. Their history runs to waste. They exist, but they hardly live. There is indeed a movement in them, but it has no definite aim. It leads nowhere. They just end up in the same place all the time. Only after a long time, if God has mercy on them, do they find themselves once more in a position to start afresh and with not one step further forward in all of those years. We see that happening today. I mean, we see that cycle, I'll say it that way. Early on in the 1800s or late 1800s, the Holy Spirit started moving, and you had a movement, and then it kind of died off. And then in the 70s, 60s, 70s, they had another kind of regeneration movement. And there's others in there. It kind of cycles through different generations. But that's, again, an example of what the Israelites did. What happened to the Israelites in their time.
Well, it says that
Moses.
Aaron was the first high priest to die.
Yeah, he was.
And
He
that
was the first high priest.
it was to landmark the history of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was over, I mean, he was older than Moses.
Yeah, he was.
Moses 120 was.
Moses was 120 when he died. So
Aaron was.
we don't know how exactly long, but Moses had to die because he didn't go in there, and that was the 40th year. As we get to it, that'll be the 40th year. So Moses died right there with him. So Moses wasn't as old as his brother was,
Well,
or Miriam.
Yeah, Miriam, she's the one that's old enough to take him down and put him in.
Right. She was older than he was, evidently. Maybe Aaron was older. I think they always mention it as Aaron and Miriam, so maybe Aaron. I'd have to go back and look at the genealogy. So Aaron died there up on the mountaintop. It says Aaron died as a great but complex figure, even more so than Miriam. He was used of God mightily as Moses' partner to initiate the priesthood and to plead with Moses for the people. At the same time, he was instrumental in the grotesque debacle of the golden calf and in challenging Moses' authority with his sister Miriam. So, just tells us God can use you, but if you still get the big head and go off on your own, and that's kind of what Aaron did until God got him back again. So, all right, I appreciate everybody coming
It's a
out.
good lesson.
And we'll try again next week.